All right. Two football games have already happened as I'm making this video, so this is a little bit belated. But for this video, I'm going to talk about the AFC. In the next video, I'll mention the NFC. For the AFC, starting with the Patriots, I think the Patriots will be the worst team in the NFL. Their offense will be better than last year, but nowhere near to the extent that they're competent or decent, just better than horrible, but still a bad offense, below average. And then the defense is going to get worse, partly because they lost Matt Judon, a good pass rusher, but even more importantly, they lost Bill Belichick. Despite having bad offenses, Bill Belichick, who is a defensive genius, at least kept the defense looking strong. I think their defense is going to get worse. The offense is not going to be good either, so that I'm taking the Patriots to be the worst team in the NFL, and we'll end up with the number 1 overall pick next season, not including trades. That they end up drafting number 1 overall based off of their record for having the worst season is what I mean. The Bills, I feel like they had a Super Bowl window and it closed. They went all in. They signed Von Miller to a long-term expensive deal, knowing he was not young when they signed him. Making moves like that to go all in to win a Super Bowl, and they failed. Their Super Bowl window is closed. This team on paper is worse than they were last season. If they could not get it done last year, they're not going to get it done this year. This year, I think the Bills not only are not Super Bowl contenders, but I will go as far to say they will not make the playoffs. This is a bad Bills team. I don't know if they're going to be below average, but they are not playoff contenders, let alone Super Bowl contenders. This will be one of the worst Bills seasons in a long time. For the Dolphins, I see them about as strong as they were, maybe slightly not as good, but overall, this will be a team that are contenders to make the playoffs. I can see them making the playoffs, but this is not a Super Bowl contending team. They will not be in the AFC Championship game. I can see them going as far as the divisional round, but I think that's their ceiling. They will not make the AFC Championship game, let alone the Super Bowl. And then finally, the Jets I see as the best team in this division and possibly in the entire league. The Jets defense is absolutely dominant on all 3 levels. I'm calling the Jets defense the best defense in the entire NFL. The offense is better than people realize. They have better wide receivers than they did last year. They have a much better offensive line than they did last year. And a significantly better backup quarterback than last year. This Jets team is so strong that even if Aaron Rodgers goes down again, as long as Tyrod Taylor or whoever the backup quarterback is competent, not good, I said competent, then I have not lost faith in this team. Nick Foles, we all know Nick Foles was not a good quarterback. But he won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles because he was competent. He's not a quarterback that will win you games, but at least he doesn't make unnecessary mistakes. And this Jets team is so strong that it can carry a quarterback as long as they don't screw things up. Even technically not a backup quarterback, Peyton Manning, his last year in the NFL, played nothing like he used to. And they won a Super Bowl with him mainly because the defense carried him. And the Jets have a very, very strong team. They're in it to win it 100%. I'm actually taking the Jets as my favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. And then next conference, not conference, next division, NFC North. The Ravens, I think they had a Super Bowl window and it closed. They barely lost to the Chiefs in Kansas City, literally a toenail from the game going into overtime. But that hasn't changed my opinion. I think this Ravens team was lucky that even got close, despite some people complaining the refs were against them. I don't think that's the case. I think the Ravens have lost important players on both sides of the ball. They lost a very good defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald. The Ravens are not as strong as they were last year. They had a Super Bowl window. They had a chance, and they messed it up. The Ravens, I still see them making the playoffs, but this is not a Super Bowl championship team by any measure, in my opinion. The Browns, it all comes down to Deshaun Watson. My opinion is the Browns absolutely lost the Deshaun Watson trade. If they did not make the Deshaun Watson trade, then they would be Super Bowl contenders because of otherwise their roster is not bad. But they lost that trade miserably. They lost it even worse than the 49ers lost the trade for Trey Lance. Because at least, even though they wasted 3 first-round picks on Trey Lance, at least they did not sign him to a huge contract, taking away from their salary cap. Not only did the Browns forfeit 3 first-round picks that they could have used to improve their roster, but also Deshaun Watson is eating up a big part of their salary cap. If Deshaun Watson plays as well as he used to when he was with the Texans, then the Browns are Super Bowl contenders. But if not, this team ceiling is about as good as they were last year, but not better than that. And as far as do I think Deshaun Watson is going to go back and play as well as he used to, my assumption is no. I think this will also be Watson's last year in Houston, not in Houston, in Cleveland, unless he plays as well as he used to. If he doesn't, then Cleveland probably cuts their losses and cuts him, absorbing the big cap hit, doing what they have to restructure things or even let other players go, and then get a fresh start. And then, of course, the Bengals. The Bengals, I think, win the division this year. They actually weren't terrible last year, even with Joe Burrow going down. So imagine how much better they will be with him. The Bengals will be one of the strongest teams in the NFL. Super Bowl contenders, even, as long as Joe Burrow can stay healthy. Obviously, I'm not picking the Bengals to win the Super Bowl, but I see them being one of the strongest teams. Top 10, possibly even top 5. Very, very strong team the Bengals have. I don't expect them to win the Super Bowl, but I can easily see it happening. At the very least, it would not surprise me to see them in the AFC Championship game. Moving on, AFC West, Chiefs. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the Chiefs other than they're Super Bowl favorites for a reason. I think the Jets are actually better, despite what Las Vegas thinks, but I think the Chiefs are still one of the best teams in the NFL. As long as they have Mahomes, this team is going nowhere. Nobody else in AFC West has a remote chance of beating them to win the division. Obviously, the Super Bowl contenders. The Chargers, I think, are actually much worse than most people think. Most people think the Chargers are about an average team this year. I think they're below average, one of the worst teams in the league. They have a good quarterback. They have a good offensive line. But then, who does he throw to? I don't think any of their wide receivers are good. Their tight end, not good. Their running back, not good. In the defense, they have Khalil Mack, who is old. Who knows if he's going to keep it up? Joey Bosa, who gets injured all the time, Derwin James, who gets injured all the time, and then outside of those three players, nobody else on their defense even looks particularly competent. Their defense, I think, is just terrible. Their offense, outside of quarterback and offensive line, is weak. I don't see this Chargers team going anywhere. I think they're going to have a bad season. Even one of the worst teams. The Raiders, actually, the Raiders have a fairly good roster. My only problem with the Raiders is the quarterback position. Actually, I've seen a lot of parallels between the Raiders this year and the Colts last year. The Colts last year did not have a terrible roster. They just had a bad quarterback situation. So I think the Raiders will be a bottom 10 team. May even bottom 5. But that could help them in the long run if they get their franchise quarterback. The Broncos, it actually will not surprise me if Bo Nix becomes the best quarterback in this draft, and I mean that. Because Sean Payton not only is good at developing quarterbacks, but he's good at identifying talent. When the Kansas City Chiefs spent 2 first-round picks to trade up to get Mahomes, a lot of people criticized the Chiefs for doing that, especially when he didn't play his rookie season. And they've had the last laugh ever since. Well, Sean Payton actually wanted the Saints to get him, but they couldn't because the Chiefs traded up. So Sean Payton is very good at identifying quarterback talent and developing it. So I still think Bo Nix could be the best quarterback in this draft. I'm very high on him. My only problem is the rest of the roster around him is weak. I see the Broncos being an average team this year, but missing the playoffs, even with good quarterback play, because I don't trust the roster around them. Their offense, outside of offensive line, is not looking good. The defense looks atrocious. So I think that the Broncos missed the playoffs, but if they found their quarterback, and I already know Sean Payton is a good coach. If you have a good quarterback and a good head coach, that's long-term stability and success. It's going to take them a few years to build up a strong team, but the foundation is there. Moving on. I've talked about AFC East, AFC North, AFC West, AFC South. I actually think teams in AFC South, except the Texans, will be better than people think. Obviously, the Texans will be good, but everyone already knows that. I don't have to sit here and defend the Texans because everyone, or at least almost everyone, who keeps up with football assumes the Texans will be good, and they will. But I actually think the Colts and the Jaguars will be much better than people realize. I think the Jaguars, for example, will have the best defense they've had since the 2017 year. The Eagles won the Super Bowl that year. And the Jaguars' defense that year was known as Sacksonville because they had the most sacks. And this will be a very dominant defense the Jaguars have. At the same time, their offense will be better than that offense was because their offense that year was really not good. Trevor Lawrence might not be as good as people are hoping, but he's absolutely better than Blake Bortles. That first round wide receiver they drafted this year has looked really good in the preseason. Their offense has quite a bit to work with, too. I see this Jaguars team being much stronger than most people think. let's put it this way. If the Jaguars end up in the AFC Championship game, I'm actually not going to be shocked. They're much better than people think. The Colts also better than people think. Very strong team. Their main problem last year, the Achilles heel of the Colts last year, was their quarterback position. They're getting their starting quarterback returning to the team. Very strong in the trenches. All around, very complete, solid team. The Colts, 3 teams. It would not surprise me if 3 teams out of one division all make the playoffs, which is very unusual, but it's happened before and it can happen. The Colts, the Jaguars, and the Texans, with AFC South being the strongest division in the NFL. The Titans are not making the playoffs, let alone being contenders. They're not that good. That said, they're actually not as bad as most people think, as long as their quarterback, Will Levis, does not wet the bed. This Titans team is not going to make the playoffs, for that matter, but they're not necessarily going to be one of the worst teams in the league. On paper, they have a reasonable amount of talent on both sides of the ball. They're not contenders even to make the playoffs, but they're not necessarily going to be one of the worst teams. To put it this way, I expect the Titans to be drafting somewhere around number 10 in the next draft rather than in the top 5. So the team has improved, but not significantly enough to make the playoffs. Just better than people think. So that's it for the AFC. In my next video, I'll discuss the NFC.